What's up everyone? Ian Stewart here, and welcome back for week 3 of dynamic equalization and multiband compression. As promised, this week we're going to be taking a look at some more kind of standard downward multiband compression, a few different ways of doing it. And then next week we're going to move on to kind of final limiting and doing some A/B final before and after comparisons. Okay, so once again, big ups to Jordan for providing all the audio. Thank you, man. Much appreciated. Sorry it took me so long. Hopefully it's worth it. Okay, so let's get to it. Again, we're going to start off with this Electro House track. And the first thing we're going to look at is just a nice, gentle 3-band downward multi-band compressor. Now, if you recall from last week, we had the upward compressor before it. If we look at them right next to each other, you'll see, hey, it kind of looks like those crossover bands are kind of maybe in a similar place. Well, actually, they're in the exact same place, and that was no accident. Now, I wouldn't normally recommend doing lots of multi-band processing one after another. I'm kind of doing it here to try and get the most out of these audio examples and show you as many different techniques as possible. But if you do find it necessary, I would certainly use the same crossover points. The reason being, even though here we're in dynamic phase mode, which means we're not actually running the audio through a crossover, if we are in either linear or minimum phase, you're going to start stacking crossovers one after another, and the potential pre-ringing or phase shifting group delay associated with those crossovers is just going to get duplicated each time. However, to me, it's better to have that than to start spreading that group delay and or phase shift and or pre-ringing around different spots. All right, at least that way it's in one place. So the first reason I gave is a reason not to do one after another. But if you have to, if you got Pro MB, use dynamic phase mode, and if you don't, keep those crossovers in the same place. Probably keep them in the same place no matter what, realistically, just because it's going to, ultimately it's going to be a little bit less noticeable. All right. So again, let's just take a look at our settings real quick. We've got a 2-to-1 ratio. We've got a kind of medium short attack time here. And the idea here is that we want to let the transients through. We actually want to let our final stage of compression, which again, like 3 in a row, real life don't do this. But for this example, we'll make it work. But either a final bus compressor or your peak limiter, let that take care of the transients. That's what it's really good at. Let the compression take care of kind of just average levels. So we've got the longer attack time, kind of medium short release time. A range of 6 dB, that means we're not going to apply any more than 6 dB of gain reduction. Threshold to taste, obviously. Again, a nice soft knee, and that's pretty much that. So let's just take a listen. So this is with it in. And that's with it out. You know what? Let me apply a little bit of makeup gain here so that it's a little easier to kind of tell the differences. All right, so again, just adding a little bit of a sense of cohesion, gelling everything together, keeping everything a little bit more consistent. And that's going to help us when we get to that final limiting stage. All right. The other example that I've added here is a slightly faster stage. And zoom back in. What we're doing here is, first of all, you can see we're changing our spectral balance a little bit, and that's just an intentional decision. The other thing we've got, though, is much faster attack and release times, and a little bit more, well, I guess that's the same ratio, actually. We had 2 to 1 in this one as well. So same ratio, just a faster attack and release time. You could potentially increase the ratio a little bit if you wanted, although I wouldn't go too high. All right, and the idea here is we're just going to try and bring in some of the peaks a little bit more and also reshape the spectrum. So let's go ahead and listen with this in and out. Now, let me just make sure I turn the gain back down on that. Yep, okay. So you can hear that's really kind of making it a little bit more aggressive by adding some of that top end and also reining in some of those peaks. All right, the other example I want to look at today is on this rock track. If you recall, I mentioned that sometimes 2 bands is all you need. All you want is to avoid that low end triggering the rest of the compression. So that's what we've got here. All right. So if we listen to our low end, it's really just the kick in that bass. And we're actually up as high as we are just so we make sure we get all of that kick and that it's not bleeding into this portion of the signal at all. There's a bit, but it's very little, all right? And then all we've done, 1 1/4 to 1. That's kind of more of your typical mastering ratio, just really gentle compression, nice slow attack to let those peaks through, nice slow release to still let the track breathe and move a little bit. 12 dB range, which is really more than we're using. And you can also see that the threshold on the low band is -24 basically, which is a little bit lower than on the high band, shall we say. So we're going to be doing a little bit less compression. We've also added in 0.5 dB of gain to bring up that low end just a little bit. So this is kind of approaching more typical bus compression, which for rock is really something that makes sense, but just allowing that kick in that bass to kind of be compressed and tamed a little bit separately. All right, so let's see. Turn it off to start with and do a before and after. Okay, so this is just another stage that's kind of helping glue everything together, make everything a little bit more cohesive. So that's what's going on there. So there you have 3 examples of multiband downward compression. The last thing I just want to touch on real quickly is that sometimes a little standard bus compression is all you need. And in this case, I think that's kind of the final thing that helps glue this track together. All right, so this is just the glue, which is a model of the SSL bus compressor. And really, we're just looking for like 2 to maybe 3 dB of gain reduction, 10 millisecond attack, which is in mastering terms actually pretty short, but letting some of those transients through. 400 millisecond release, which is pretty long, and just the 2-to-1 ratio. Just the slightest bit of makeup gain. All right, so let's just pop that on and off real quick. All right, and that is getting the whole track to breathe just a little bit with that kick and bass, which for a style like this is, I think, kind of appropriate and necessary. All right, so that's it for this week. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, share around, tell your friends. Next week, we're just going to do some final comparisons, add on the limiters, see how the limiters kind of deal with everything that we've prepped them for, and do comparison. Jordan did send me a demo kind of master, so we'll see how close we got to his and do a little comparison there as well. All right, thanks, and I'll see you next time. Bye.